during a hurricane, and within minutes was torn apart by the impact of 40-foot waves. Therein ended the hopes and dreams of the sailors of that ship. The year was 1770, and the ship was the Widow. Just for clarification, Widow is a place off of East Africa, and I'll explain later, not the widow like it. Along the Cape Cod coastline, it wasn't unusual for shipwrecks to occur in the area known as the Graveyard of the Atlantic. Over the centuries, the ever-changing sand dunes had caused well over 3,000 ships to become stuck where the forceful waves crashed and sunk them. But the Widow was different and caught the attention of people for over 250 years, for it was a pirate ship and was known to be laden with massive treasure. The captain of that ship was a young man by the name of Black Sam Bellow. He was tall, with long black hair and swarthy looks. He made a dashing figure. He was well-mannered and tidy, I like the little word tidy, who eschewed the fashionable white wigs that they wore, and took his long black hair and tied it in a simple satin bow. I could almost picture Johnny Depp playing him right now. He was little known about him except for that he looked like, and he had come from England and tried his hand at being a sailor on a legitimate ship, and was also part of a diving expedition. But that didn't pan out very well. Folklore says that he was sailing at the time to Cape Cod to visit his love of his life, Maria Hallett. We don't know much about Maria except that she did birth his baby the prior year. And the poor baby passed away, and Maria would spend many, many hours on many days on the bluffs of Marconi Beach looking for her love to come back for her. You see, her parents would not let them marry because he was impoverished at the time, which is probably why he decided to become a pirate. Now, moving forward to 1984, another treasure hunter by the name of Barry Clifford found the elusive ship. He was able to distinguish it from other shipwrecks when he brought up the ship's bell and what was clearly written on it. It was the first time a pirate ship has ever been brought up and has ever been actually documented because of its bell. And at the time of its sinking, it had the largest pirate prize ever captured. The treasure weighed 4.5 to 5 tons, including ivory and indigo and sterling and gold. Now, I became interested in learning more about pirates after visiting the Widow Museum on a lark in Provincetown in 1994. The guns were okay. The cannon was nice, but what really drew my attention were the pirate shoes they found. Susan, you should take note of this. The shoes still had the imprint of the person who wore them. They had their toes imprinted in it, and that fascinated me. I began to wonder what kind of fierce owner of that shoe and my interest peaked. What made these men become pirates in the first place? I would have thought the answers were very clear-cut. Pirates were the bad guys, the rest of the world were good guys. But as I searched more and more, the waters got muddier and muddier. Where did these treasures come from? Well, for 100 years, Spain had been drawing riches from its personal treasure house of the New World, the Americas. From the time of the conquistadors, they had plundered the Aztecs of Mexico, the Arab of West Indies, the Mayans of Yucatan. With the sacking and the pillaging of these ancient civilizations and mining of the wealth of their lands, the Spanish Empire had become the greatest power in the world. During the next century, 1 million pounds of gold, tons of silver, copper, pearls, topazes, emeralds, tobacco were transported to Spain, first on the backs of mules and Indians who struggled for days under the weight, then by canoe on a river that led out to the coast. Finally, it ended up on the Spanish galleons. When fully loaded, these galleons made the long trek across the ocean to the motherland. Not all ships made it, some were sunk because of the heavy weight and the bad weather, while others were plundered by pirates like San Bellamy and Widow. So, when you think about it, these pirates were stealing stolen goods, already stolen goods. I got it. Another fact was that the Widow was originally commissioned and had worked as a slaving ship. It regularly transported 700 kidnapped people from West Africa, a month from West Africa to the Americas. And Sam Bellamy and his crew, in their search for a good-sized vessel, overtook the Weta and forever took it out of the commission of its original task. You know, think about it. Slavery was legal at the time, and Captain Bellamy's act was definitely illegal. But who was really right? It's kind of mucky, because it actually took, there were 700 less people being kidnapped, being sent over to the New World. I like that idea, that there was one less leadership out there. Even a comparison between the miserable lives of the merchant seamen and the pirates showed a stark difference. Now, legitimate seamen at the time were treated little more like than slaves. They could be eaten and flogged regularly with little provocation if they had a tyrannical captain. Even if they didn't, they still worked 7 days a week and only earned possibly a pound a month. But in stark contrast, pirates were a rather democratic lot. Yeah, they had the power to vote their captains in and out. They also had equal share of the treasure that was confiscated. In fact, they had a code of ethics that if you were to join a pirate ship, you had to sign. And I pulled up a few of them, and one of them came up with different things. For example, it actually had workers' comp. If, for example, if you lost a limb, depending on how important it was, you could get more money if it was more important, like an arm or a leg. You could get 800 pieces of 8 if you lost it. And then lesser, maybe it was just a finger if you lost a finger or a couple toes, or something like that. So, you had the workers' comp. There was usually a band on board because they needed to give something, you know, these folks, they didn't have a lot of water, so they drank a lot of rum. And so the band, the musicians were given the Sabbath day off every week. Seriously. But the rest of the 6 days, they had to play whenever they were told. And they could not gamble on board, and they had a curfew at 8 o'clock. I mean, there was a few others. So they had a very organized lot. They were also non-discriminatory. You could do the work. You could be any color in the world. You could be, as long as you're male, you could do the work. You were able to do that. And you were able to rise out of the level at a time, at the lower level, class level, at a time when nobody else could do so. Let's go over some of these. While sailors were barely making enough to survive, pirate ships were returning to port with enough loot to split 1,000 pounds per person. That's the equivalent of what English gentry earned for the day. In an age where it was virtually impossible to rise out of the lower class, there was no shortage of men eager to partake in this. And once they got that 1,000 pounds, many of them would go ashore and set up legitimate and prosperous lives as merchants. However, I shouldn't paint too good a picture of these rascals. They did make people walk the plank and kill them in some awful ways. So. But yet, somewhere it does get a little bit murky for the good and the bad guys. Back to the widow. Whatever happened to Over 200 bodies washed ashore. 7 survived. Of those 7, 2 were found to be kidnapped victims of pirates, and the remaining 5 were found guilty of piracy and hung at the entrance of the Boston Harbor for several years as a lesson to those seafarers who had any ideas about joining the swashbuckling life of a pirate. Mr.